Greetings! Geekbeard here, as usual, also known as Elliot. Thanks for joining us. As you may have gathered, today's topic is men are more diverse than women. And this is a part of a continuation of our effort to try to dig down and find the true nature of gender in society throughout history, but also as rooted in biology. Basically, males take more risks than females. But this goes all the way back, all the way down to the most fundamental level of what sex is as a biological institution. And that's mostly gender, of course. What is gender at the most fundamental level? It's all about risk-taking. We're probably all kind of familiar with the fact that males just take more risks than females. You know, they like to drive fast, and, you know, a lot of males are adrenaline junkies. Males are overrepresented in prisons, for example, and as criminals. That's a risk-taking behavior. You're challenging the authority of the government, and the police, the judiciary is going to come down pretty hard on you if you fail. But the argument I'm trying to get to here is that risk is not just a behavior that males do. It's actually intrinsic to what males are. Males are, in a sense, almost more mutant than females. There's a wider variation of practically every measurable attribute amongst males than females. Males have a wider distribution of intelligence, which means there's more males at the top end of the spectrum of intelligence, but also more males at the bottom end. Athletic performance has been measured, and there's more males at extremes in that department as well, more at the top and more at the bottom. I'm definitely not at the top, I'll admit that right now. And every known genetic disease is experienced amongst men at almost 4 times the rate of women. And this 4 times factor is something you're going to see popping up surprisingly often, considering it's barely been commented upon. Men or boys actually experience autism. They get autism at 4 times the rate of female children. And men are gay at about 4 times the rate of women. It's almost like men, in a loose sense, are actually 4 times more mutant than women. And if you understand a little bit about our biology, it's not surprising that this idea that men are more mutant than women. Men are more diverse than women. Like if there's more mutant properties exhibited in men, then the male population as a whole is more diverse than the female population as a whole. And that is my thesis, and that's what I'm pursuing here. So, So it's all about risk, right? Okay, wait, hold that thought. I'll come back to that. I wanted to talk about our biology first. What we have as humans is called an XY sex determination system. And this is about what are called the sex chromosomes. Women have XX, which means two X chromosomes. Men have XY, an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. And a lot of genetic diseases will be biased towards men, or will occur more frequently in men, simply because they are linked to the sex chromosomes. They are the result of the sex chromosomes, the genes that occur in the sex chromosomes. And they only, if one of these diseases is present in the X chromosome of a man, he will manifest that disease. Whereas a woman has to have the disease genes in both copies of her X chromosome. And I think that's called homozygosity or something, or a homozygous gene. Don't quote me on that. I'm not extremely experienced with that particular lingo. But yes, it's true that there are diseases that occur more frequently in men than women, simply because men have only one X chromosome, and if it's present in the X chromosome of men, it will be manifest phenotypically, which means physically. Whereas if it occurs in women, they have to have two copies of the gene, one in each X chromosome, in order to manifest the disease physically. Otherwise, they'll just be silent carriers of the disease. And people say, oh, but the sex chromosomes are only one of 23 chromosomes. That's true, but the sex chromosomes, for some reason, for reasons we don't yet understand, seem to have a disproportionate effect. So, men are more diverse than women. Now, that doesn't mean it's better to be a man. That means, as a man, there is a greater chance that you're at the extreme end of the spectrum. So there's a greater occurrence amongst men of genius, for example. But there's going to be an equally greater occurrence of just abject failure in society and maybe criminal insanity, criminal tendency or insanity. So it's definitely not better to be a man just on that basis alone, even though the statistics continue to show that there are more male Nobel Prize winners, for example, and more male CEOs, and I'm pretty sure more male self-made millionaires. But to be a self-made millionaire, often you have to start your own company, and men start their own company a lot more than women do, which is a risky endeavor. You're taking other people's money, and they're going to be pretty annoyed if you squander it. Indeed, they could take you to court if you're incompetent and you squander their money. This just supports what I'm trying to say, which is that men take more risks than women. But more than that, to even be a man is intrinsically more risky than to be a woman, because men are more mutant than women. Men experience the effects of mutation more so than women. Men are more diverse than women. So how do these things kind of blend? Why is it that men take more risks than women behaviorally, but men are already subject to more risk than women from birth. Biologically, men are subject to more genetic risk than women. Mutation risk, if you want to put it that way, because mutation is undeniably a risk. Mutation goes bad most of the time. But the results of mutation benefit society as a whole. Men benefit society as a whole, despite the fact that there are many more violent and criminal men than there are women. Men benefit society as a whole, because for all of those men's at the sort of negative extremes, there are equally more men at the positive extremes. There are more male leaders and Nobel laureates and business founders and innovators. And because that's biological, that will always be the case. There's no amount of gender equality worship that's going to change that. I couldn't find a better phrase to describe the state of our current civilization than gender equality worship, whatever that really even means. I don't know what they mean by gender equality these days. It seems like they pick apart the statistics, the social statistics, and if there's any discrepancy between the genders, they assume it's some structural evil that has to be attacked and erased. Nothing could be further from the truth. And in fact, it's not going to succeed. It doesn't seem to be about equality anymore, or at least equality of opportunity. It seems to be more about total equivalence, trying to make every measurable social statistic about the genders absolutely equal, absolutely equivalent, to make the genders totally equivalent within society, which is absolute madness. The genders are not going to be made equivalent. They are nowhere near equivalent. I mean, even the physical features of the genders you could say are pretty obvious, pretty obviously distinct in humans. I'm just going to say a line here because I don't know what else to say. Humans are the pinnacle, not just of general evolution, but also of the evolution of sex. And, as such, radically more genderized than any species in the history of life. Now, this isn't what you're going to get from evolutionary biologists, who are apparently some of the stupidest people on the planet. They think human beings are some mildly androgynous species, which is what you'll get if you read Wikipedia or something. Actually, we are the most genderized species in the history of life. And the evolution of sex is not exactly grinding to a halt. It will continue. As such, future humans shall be yet more genderized than even our radically genderized selves. So, the pursuit of gender equivalence, which is what gender egalitarianism has become, is absolute insanity, and it will fail catastrophically. It's already failed. It's just people continue to believe it regardless, because it's practically the ideology of Western civilization today. Can you think of any single ideology that we worship more than that? I want to go on about this, but I mean, there's some stuff I could say, but I won't. So, humans are the pinnacle of the evolution of sex. We're the most genderized species in the history of life. That means that what we've been talking about, which is that men are more diverse than women, is probably more extreme amongst humans than amongst any species of animal that has ever existed. I mean, it takes a lot to produce a genius or someone that really changes the world, an eminent man, as Charles Darwin put it. Because Charles Darwin was aware of this idea. He claimed that, there were more eminent men than women, primarily because men are more diverse than women. You wouldn't believe that Charles Darwin actually said that, would you? Because you've probably never heard it before. I don't know how this knowledge has been so successfully suppressed, but it has. So men are more diverse than women. Men also take more risks than women. To be more diverse than women is something that starts at birth. From birth, men have more genetic diseases than women, more autism than women, etc. So it's an integrated thing. It's integrated. It's interwoven. It proceeds from birth, but it proceeds throughout our life as well. How does it turn out that men simply take more risks, i.e. behave in a more risky way than women, even though at the same time we are biologically being subject to more risk than women, because that's the only thing that can explain the from birth behavior discrepancies. A line a lot of opponents are going to use against you, or against me, is a lot of gender and gender culture is cultural. Sorry, that came out slightly wrong. A lot of gender identity and so on is essentially cultural or social. To that I say, so what? We are a cultural species. We have culture. Animals don't have culture. Culture is what makes us human. It's what we do. Think about the gender culture of the past. Men and women had different fashion. Men and women were all sorts of different things were expected of them. Admittedly, there was a very strong patriarchy, which expected all sorts of things of men, mostly, military service if required, and, serving their father and their family and doing what was expected. But women also had a matriarchy. Do you think women's behavior in the past was just some enslavement by men? No. A lot of what women learned was passed down to them from other women, from their mothers, from their family. So just as men had a patriarchy, women had a matriarchy. They had matriarchal gender culture that was all about the standards of behavior, their expectations, what they were should look for in life, their fashion even. Men didn't just define all of that stuff and say, here, this is what you must wear. Women had, plenty of choice in many matters, but it was a matrilineal thing, so it was a matriarchy. Just as men had a patriarchy, women had a matriarchy. Look, I'll admit that men had more power in the apparatus of the state, and therefore the patriarchy was a bigger thing than the matriarchy, and men were dominant. Sure. But it's ludicrous to say there was no matriarchy. Men didn't simply enslave women. A lot of what was expected of women and what was, done by women was taught to them by other women and by their mothers and so on. So that qualifies as a matriarchy. So, men are more diverse than women. Let me just spell that out a little bit better. It means that the variance of every measurable attribute is higher amongst men than amongst women. For example, height. Men are taller on average than women, and far too much analysis of the differences between the genders talks only about averages. We want to know the variance. The variance of height amongst men is higher than the variance of height amongst women. So you get more extremes. Men, in general, produce more statistical outliers. And that is why, as we said before, there are more eminent men in history, because you're only looking at the top of the distribution. There are more men that are geniuses. There are more innovators that are men. There are more men that take extreme risks and somehow succeed. But that doesn't mean there aren't more abject failures of men as well, and more men that were killed in wars and all kinds of violence and so on, or by the dangerous employment standards of the time. So if you want the technical term for it, that's it, variance. The variance of every measurable attribute is higher amongst men than amongst women, significantly. That's because men are more diverse than women. Men produce more outliers. That's why men will always produce more people of extreme wealth, people of extreme success, Nobel laureates, etc. That's always going to be the case, no matter how much they try to screw with our society and our biology and the true nature of gender, socially and biologically. I just wanted to try and round this out by talking about what gender really is. And this kind of comes to the fore for me because we've had a lot of debates about it with the trend of transgender movement recently. That's become a big deal, needless to say. And a lot of people on the conservative sort of side say, well, gender is biological. Gender is your biological sex, whether you're male or female, and that's determined at birth. No, actually, it's determined at conception. Well, I'm actually dissatisfied with that. I think human beings are the pinnacle of evolution and also the pinnacle of the evolution of sex. And I think sex, i.e. gender, infuses everything we do. I think it's a very sophisticated cultural phenomenon. It begins at conception. You are determined male or female. But it's a lot more than that within our society. There is a significant amount of what makes of gender identity, let's say, which evolves, which develops over the course of your life. Notice how I use the word evolve. It's not really the right word. And I was writing about this, and I was thinking about this today, and the word that I came up with is emerge. Emergence. That's really sort of what this is about. Your gender identity, your identity as a whole, emerges over the course of your life. Yes, a few things are determined by the time you're born already, but a lot of it also emerges over the course of your life. And like I was saying, we're a cultural species, so why should our gender not be cultural? That's a good thing. That's a strength, not a weakness. So, now let's get to the big guns. What I want to say is that gender is epigenetic. What does that mean? You've probably heard the word epigenetic before. You may not have properly understood it. It very much means emergent. historically, or well, not that long ago, people were always trying to separate things into nature or nurture. Is something determined by your biology, or is it determined by society and your experience? Well, people still ask that question, strangely, because epigenetics is the more modern theory which says that the genes that you manifest are actually selected by your experience of life. So the genes are, part of your body and all, and that's biological, and that's with you from birth. But the ones that are selected are not just selected by some deterministic biological process. They're selected by your life, by what you experience from the environment, and of course socially, because for humans, so society and culture is a big part of what you experience. Not so much for animals, because they don't have those things, for the most part. So in contrast with a lot of conservatives, I believe, yes, you have a biological sex determined at birth, but it's a good thing that gender is a highly sophisticated cultural phenomenon. I believe it's epigenetic. And that explains why men are not merely behaviorally greater risk takers than women, and therefore greater statistical outliers than women, but are intrinsically risk takers. That your very biology as a man is at higher risk than as a woman from birth. But then that's interwoven with your life experience. So yes, you're learning from society to be a risk taker to some degree as a man. You're learning all sorts of things from society as to what you potentially should do in order to be masculine, in order to be a man. And women, consequently, conversely, are learning different things from society about what culturally it means to be a woman, and what might be expected of you, and what are reasonable or good behaviors as a woman. So men and women are learning different things. And our genes, our genetic system, is as a result learning different things. So it's a complete integration. That's what epigenetics is. It's a complete integration between nature and nurture, between biology and society. And that's what gender is in our society, and that's a good thing. Don't let them just dismiss you out of hand by saying, oh, that's just social, it's just cultural, and therefore we should get rid of it. Why should we get rid of it? What's wrong with gender culture? But, more than that, gender is epigenetic. It's developing from birth. It is emergent as a unified, a fully integrated biological and social process, a full integration between nature and nurture. It's a pretty hard concept to express. I hope I've done it justice in this video. Well, thank you for listening, and I hope you've learned something about this highly contentious topic. Let's hope it doesn't get shadow banned or just banned off YouTube as a result. As usual, please like or subscribe, But above all, I'd love to hear any thoughts at all that you have in the comments section, or even in a video, or any response you feel fit. That's all for now. Hopefully I'll have the energy to release another new video soon. Bye for now.